Well, Happy New Year, everybody. I'm going to spend a little bit of time. This is sort of like a miscellaneous video. Sort of talk about mainly painting the track in Oak Hill, also a little bit of a design change and why I'm doing it. Well, I'm going to start out first, as I talked about in the previous video about the how the Atlas crossover is code 80 and the microengineering track is code 70. I said, well, that's only 10/1000ths of an inch, not that big a deal. It is a big deal. The problem is, and I don't know if you can see it, I've played around with the lighting trying to get it. This is a piece of microengineering track right here. It's sitting next to an Atlas crossover. That is a lot more than 10/1000ths. And the reason why is because the Atlas ties are unbelievably thick. They're twice as thick as the microengineering ties. So I'm going to show you in a second. I'm going to take the camera loose from the tripod here and show you how that impacts the track work and what I'm going to do to try to countermeasure it. In this view, you can see the crossover, and you can also see the microengineering track. The problem is because this piece of track right here is only about 4 inches long from where it ties into the main line, which is raised by 20/1000ths, and the Atlas crossover, which is a whole lot thicker, this track right here is basically suspended in the air. there's nothing underneath it. So I'm going to have to shim that up a little bit, and I'm not going to be able to transition the track. It's like the one behind it. This is the one going to the brickyard. It's up in the air too, close to the crossover. But I can transition it down to the earth level, in a few inches there. So that's just something I didn't realize. I just thought, well, the height of the rail is only 10/1000ths, but it's actually probably more like 30/1000ths by the time I calculate the height of the ties in there also. So let's move over to painting the rail. So when I'm painting track, my color of choice now, since you can't get flow paints anymore, is I use these Mission models. Use dark rust, and you remember I just have a small layout, so I paint with a brush. I don't have an airbrush. I will probably get an airbrush someday, but right now I just paint with the brush. So I shake it up, I'll put the cap there, I'll just dip out of the cap, well, less likely to spill it, and I just go along the side of the rail like that. Now, Mission Models is a water-based paint, so it doesn't cover the first coat usually all the way. So what I'll do is I'll let it dry. Probably come back tomorrow, something like that, and I'll give it a second coat. And that doesn't take very long. It covers the top part of the rail pretty well, but the part it doesn't cover is that little, I guess you'd call it the web, down where the spikes are. And I've noticed that, even when you ballast your track, that part of the rail shows. And if it's not a rusty color, you definitely have a shine there. So I just do this, and I run my finger along it to keep the top of the rails clean, and I'll just go through and do that for the whole layout. I've got about everything this end of it done. I've got the south end of the layout done already. So I'm going to let that dry. I'll give it a second coat, and then I'll show you how I do the ties. Okay, this is after one coat. So I can find where see the shiny spots down here, that will show up when you ballast. So that's why I give it a second coat on the inside of the rail. So I'll give it a second coat, and then we'll see what it looks like. If you see this little mark over here I'm trying to use the same section of track so we're not comparing apples to oranges. I've given this track 2 coats of the brown or the rust, and it looks pretty good. Maybe a couple places maybe I'll damage putting ballast on or something and have to touch up, but I see very little of the shininess. So for the ties, I again use Mission Models. It's Rail Tie Brown, and I wasn't sold on this at first because it sort of has a little green tint, believe it or not, when you put it on. So I'll show you what it looks like here. Once again, I usually use the cap, and I just brush it on, and I try to cover the entire tie, not get the spikes on there. I just want to make sure that the entire tie is covered, and then I'll let that dry. Come on up here. Now for the part of the tie that's away from me toward the backdrop, I don't even touch it because you can't see it at the level I'm at. I do come to the front and I get that, and I make sure I get the ends too, because they usually show a little bit, through the ballast. So I will make sure I get the top, and again I'm trying to leave the spike heads sort of the rust color. So when this dries, you can definitely probably still see sort of the green tint. I'll go ahead and finish the rest of this, and when this dries, I'll show you what I do next. So after the Rail Tie Brown has dried, these are the colors that I do next. I have some Tamiya Flat Black XF1 and some Light Sea Gray XF25. So I'm not going to show you how to dry brush, just did. I do want to point out a couple things. If you want to represent a new tie, like right here, you can just paint it flat black. Don't have to do anything else. But what I do, I dry brush flat black on everything over the Rail Tie Brown, and then I dry brush the Light Sea Gray over that. Again, if I want to have a tie that looks like it's a little bit more weathered, like this one here, I can just paint it a lot more gray. You want some variation in your ties. Now, when you're standing on the railroad tracks, just looking down the tracks, you don't see a lot of variation, to be honest with you. Maybe on some old tracks where they've been rehabilitating it, replacing some ties here and there, you'll see some. But in general, there's not a lot of variation, but still you want some variation. So just skip dry brushing a tie here and there, or dry brush one heavier. Do whatever you want. I think this method works good for me, but again, I have a 7-foot long layout and I can brush paint everything. There's a lot of people, if you Google or look on YouTube how to weather track, a lot of great ideas out there. There's a lot of great modelers. Of course, this doesn't really apply if you're using the unit track as much. But there's some really off the wall things that you wouldn't think of, and they all end up looking great. So don't be afraid to experiment. Paint isn't that expensive, and you can just always do it over again. Well, before we close, I want to talk about a little bit of a design change and one other comment that I got on a video. Somebody commented about the suitcase connectors, that if you have the ability to flip the layout upside down, soldering is a good option. I agree. You can't beat soldering. I probably should have soldered it. Most people don't have the ability to flip the layout upside down, so the suitcase connectors are a very, very good option. But I wanted to try them, and I'm really happy with them so far. If they start failing for some reason, man, I'll take them off and solder, no problem. So soldering is always probably your best bet if you have that ability. But soldering upside down under a layout isn't much fun, so I encourage you to use the suitcase connectors if you need to. So let's talk about the design change. So the road is in blue tape. Again, this isn't the scale. I showed you this in another video I had earlier. So it goes behind the depot, and I decided to cross Route 93 and then follow Route 93 out of town. And decided not to do that. Thought that's kind of boring myself. So instead, I'm going to have Route 93 come off the layout right here. I don't need another 2 feet of road paralleling the tracks. I've already got 4 or 5 feet of road, so I think that'd be kind of boring. So what I'm going to do is I'm still going to have Maple Avenue, which is this street right here, curve and tie into Route 93. There'll be a stop sign there, something like that. But in this area down here, something that's real common in southern Ohio, probably because of all the old strip mines and coal mines, are swamps. There's a lot of swampy areas. Just south of Oak Hill, the tracks ran through pretty much a swamp. And I think it'd be pretty cool to have sort of this area in here sort of be a swampy area. I don't have any water features on the other layout. I don't have any on this one, really. So I'm going to have a swamp. Not a big one, but it'll be something a little bit different anyhow. Give me a chance to model, some cattails and some brush and things like that. It's more of a senior area. So I'm going to close for now. I hope everybody has a happy new year. It's been a very difficult year for a lot of people. Thank you for sticking with me, and I appreciate all your comments and suggestions. I think YouTube is going to make this a better model railroad simply from getting all the suggestions and the input. I encourage you to stay safe. I think that this time next year things are going to be a whole lot better for everyone. So again, enjoy your New Year's Eve responsibly, and I will see you in 2021.